You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hi everybody, and thanks once more for downloading our little show. This is episode number 127 of Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, and this week we have another happy member of the class of 2018. Randy Forrest, or PT, reached out to me as he was coming down from his high of finishing the Appalachian Trail. I'm really enjoying getting these reactions to such a life-changing event, and as you've doubtless noticed, everybody seems to go through something of an epiphany in their lives. I may be wrong, but I can't imagine anybody completing this and remaining entirely unchanged. In some ways, and I've been thinking a little bit more about this, it may be a little bit of the reason that I want to go again. It's not that I'm necessarily particularly unhappy with who I am, but we can all do with some improvement, can't we? In his previous life, Randy was a probation officer, so I'd imagine the trail was quite a revelation to him as well. Randy will be on soon. Once again, for our middle section, I'm talking about my somewhat sporadic preparation for the AT this year, and I'm back on the subject of tents and backpacks. Finally, there's day 25 of The Year We Seize the Day by Elizabeth Best and Colin Bowles. They're getting there, but for Colin, it is still a hard road. So now let's meet Randy, or PT, which is short for probation termination. Okay, today's guest, Randy Forrest, was kind of so excited about his 2018 through hike that he wanted to share it with all of us. And after just about one or two, maybe three messages between us, we made it happen. Hi, Randy. How are you?
I'm doing great today. How about you, Steve?
I'm good. It's Three Kings Day here in Spain, and I've just been celebrating that at lunch. It's now about 4 o'clock in the afternoon over here, and I believe it's about 10:30 in the morning where you are. Is that right?
That's correct. Now that I know it's Three Kings Day, I might start celebrating over here too.
Quite right too. I've got a 6 hours head start on you.
All right.
Now, you share some similarities with a recent guest, Dan Harris, or Scars. What's the connection between the two of you?
Well, Dan was a CIA agent, and I worked as a probation and parole officer for the state of Florida for 34 years. So we were both in law enforcement.
Right.
And both retired from law enforcement.
But there was more of a connection to the you than that. Before, you didn't meet him in 2018 on the hike, but you had a connection with him prior to going on the hike, didn't you?
Yes, we had contacted each other because we realized we were both law enforcement officers retiring, hiking the trail. And come to find out, he had cancer and had actually lost one of his lungs. And
Right.
Mother had previously was real sick with cancer and going through chemotherapy. So we had chatted a little bit about that. And he had, I was not a fan of chemotherapy, which my mom had to go through, suffered a tremendous amount. And Dan had survived cancer, losing his lung, going through a type of cancer treatment called immunotherapy. So I got together and told him that he had started a charity for his hike and helped the charity. The money went to his charity through immunotherapy. So any money that comes through my YouTube channel is also going to his charity of immunotherapy.
That is very cool.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
Yeah, he was a great guy, I must say. He's a great guest on the show. And much like Dan, you didn't have any previous meaningful history with backpacking. Is that right?
Very little, other than, going out and camping at a campground, now doing some car camping. No, yeah. Prior to my through hike, I'd had none of that.
So now the name of this show is Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. So what exactly was it that led you to your own midlife crisis then, Randy?
Yeah, well, I retired, and I was pretty much an athlete through most of my life. I played a lot of competitive racquetball.
All right.
When I retired, I was looking for something to do. I watched a National Geographic documentary on Netflix one time, and it kind of opened my eyes as to, hey, this is a pretty cool thing. My dad had always talked about wanting to hike the Appalachian Trail, although he never got to it. And so I started doing some research, and, one thing led to another, and the next thing you know, I decided to become a thru hiker. And
So what was it? So I've seen that same film, and the film's pretty darn good. I still don't think the definitive film has been made about the Appalachian Trail yet, and I'm sure that's going to happen one day. But what was it about the trail that attracted you in the first place?
The challenge, it's and knowing that you're going to be seeing things out there that nobody or very few people in this world ever get to see, and you have to work hard for every view or everything you get. Nothing comes easy, and it was a huge challenge, and I just made me like, wow, I got to do this.
That is the reward, isn't it? For getting the top of those endless climbs is the view that you get at the top there. And you have to work. You have to work for those views every single time, don't you?
Every time. And then sometimes you work for some that you don't end up getting.
Yeah, especially when the weather's lousy. Oh, it's a nightmare. Yeah, we went through some of the New Hampshire with lousy weather, so we didn't see some of those views. And when we spoke about this previously, you asked, because I'm going to go in 2019 as well. You asked if I was going to go solo this time. I'm not, and I wonder how you would have reacted to the same question should you ever decide to go again.
I agreed with your statement 100%. I couldn't imagine starting a through hike, having to hike up Katahdin and then turn around and hike back. Since you can't camp on Katahdin the first day, your first day has got to be a 10 plus mile day up and down Mount Katahdin. That's starting out pretty strong.
And it's also the finish on Mount Katahdin that's the thing that I just can't get around that. That for me to finish on Katahdin is still going to be the thing that I want to do again.
I agree with you 100%. I couldn't see Springer Mountain being a pinnacle of the hike. Springer Mountain was just kind of a plaque and a place. And Mount Katahdin was something you had to work hard to get to, and had to work hard to get to the top, and the sign, the people, the view, it was the ultimate finish.
Yeah, it certainly was. So how did you get it? You made the decision, you saw the film. How did you get in shape for the hike? And once you were in shape for what you thought was in shape for the hike, did that actually help with your fitness for the hike? And the reason I asked the question is I don't think I was prepared for how I knew there would be ups and downs, and I've heard of pointless ups and downs in the past, but I didn't realize quite how it is its own fitness regime, isn't it?
Yeah, for me, it was very hard because I live in Florida, and that's flat land. And
tell me about it.
Yeah, the only hills you're going to get are when you go to a stadium somewhere, which I did. I actually went to some high school stadiums and walked up and down the stairs trying to get at least something when it comes to climbing. But there's no way that you can prepare for it without doing it. And what I like about the trail, especially going like we talked about earlier, northbound, is it seems like that it prepares you for the next part. You get stronger in the first part, and it never gets easier, but each thing you do prepares you for something that you're going to be going across later on in the hike. So you just kind of get in shape as you go.
I agree with you. It's kind of an under-recognized thing about the trail, as far as I'm concerned. And I've actually, Bruce mentioned it in one of our other shows, Returning to Katahdin, when he said it's almost as if it's perfectly set up, this hike. The different sections prepare you for, as you say, for that next section. The tough bits that are going to be there. You've read about Pennsylvania, you've read about the White Mountains, but by the time you get to those places, you're kind of ready, aren't you?
Yeah, you get supreme confidence in yourself as you get going, and you cross these obstacles, and then you realize that there's nothing that this trail can put in front of me that I can't do. I've done it already, and by the time you get to those real hard sections, they're still hard and they're still there, but you, in your mind, or at least in my mind, I was confident to know I could do them.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned that you followed a bunch of YouTubers, and there was one in particular, I think, was it Highlander? It was called, I wrote something down, I can't remember what it was. I think it was Highlander. Yeah. Tell us what happened to him and how invested you were in his success and what it meant to you when he had to leave the trail.
Yeah, it was a couple of years ago, and when I first saw that Netflix documentary and started looking around, I started watching this guy. It was Highlander. I want to say it's 57 or 58. I can't remember the number after his name, but if you just type in Highlander hiking, you could find him on YouTube.
Sure.
And I got addicted to his, I don't say addicted, but, I got really into his hike, and I started every day I would come home and, oh, good, he's posted another video, and I would watch it. And I was excited. And I came home one day and watched his video, and he quit. And, he had his own issue or his own reasons for quitting, which is cool, but it hurt me. It's like, wow, it's like I lost a friend. And, so I realized how invested people can get into some of these YouTubers. And then, once he had quit, the next year I started following, which was not last year, but the year before, I started following some others. I followed Early Riser and a few others that were on the trail and really got into their things. And some of them finished and some of them didn't. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, and you retired fairly young to do this, didn't you? So what precipitated that relatively early retirement?
Well, early age, I actually did 34 years. But
All right.
part of the reason is my mom had gotten sick with cancer. And I went to my boss and said, if I'm going to take family medical leave. If I run out of leave and my mom is still going along strong, then I'm just going to retire. And then I said, but if she passes away and I still have, leave left that I don't use it all up, I'll come back and finish out my last. I had one more year I could work. And I went home and my wife told me, she said, I told her what I talked to my boss about. And she said, why did you tell him that? I says, well, I don't know. She said, why didn't you just tell him you were going to retire? So I went back to work the next day and talked to my boss and said, listen, I'm not coming back. He said, okay. So that's how I ended up retiring a year earlier than I had expected. So I was planning on going in 2019, but that gave me the ability to go in 2018.
So you saw the YouTube stuff, you followed various people, but you had to buy everything brand new, didn't you, effectively? What were the main criteria for your gear selection? Were you taking advice from the YouTube channels, or were you looking online, and what were you looking for when you were looking for gear?
Well, I looked for, I didn't look at too many of the thru hikers pre-hike gear videos. I watched most of their post-hike gear videos, knowing what worked for them and what didn't work for them.
Sure.
What I needed to get in my gear was as lightweight as I could get. I've had 2 knee surgeries on my right knee, an ACL reconstruction, meniscus tears, all kinds of stuff in my right knee. So I knew that the lighter I could go, the better off I would be. And I discovered Z-Packs, and their company is actually about 30 miles south of me. I drove down there, kind of toured the facility, and talked to Will Wood, who works there, and he's a pass-through hiker, and got a lot of information from him.
That's Redbeard, isn't it? Is it
Redbeard? Yeah, Redbeard.
Yeah.
And ended up getting a lot of gear from Z-Packs. I used a Z-Packs duplex tent. I used their bear bag. I used the pack. I used the Arc Blast as their pack. And the rain kilt, the rain jacket, a lot of stuff I got from Z-Packs. So
right.
I stayed as ultralight as I could.
So tell us, what was your experience? As you know, as I'm going myself this year, I'm always I need a new tent myself. What was your experience like with the tent and with them as a company?
They worked great with me and for me. All the gear held up as almost perfectly well. My tent had a few little micro tears or small tears in the vestibule, which easily was repaired while I was on the trail with the tape that came along with it.
Sure.
When I got back home, they ended up replacing my whole tent. My pack.
Wow.
Oh yeah, they did me right. My pack had some wear and tear on the hip belt where it connected to your back, and it had some basic wear and tear, and it was ready to either be repaired or thrown away by the end of the hike. Well, I took my pack in also, and they completely repaired that all for free.
Wow. Now,
the only issue, one of the things that Z-Packs doesn't have is a phone number. So you have to communicate with them with email. Luckily, living that close to them, I just drive down there. So I'm lucky in that way.
Yeah. So you were happy, in general terms, you were happy with what you chose. Did you take advice from other hikers, or did you just think, this is what I feel I need? Because I know that when I first did this, it was a case of I looked in outdoorgearlab.com and I chose some of their top picks and stuff like that. But really, you can, there's almost like a cottage industry in this country, in America, about what's the best pack to take and what's the best this to take and what's the best that to take. I tried to read as much as I could about the things I was taking and then see what I thought was important before I went. Is that kind of how you approached it? That's
pretty much how I approached it too. And I was pretty lucky on all of my gear. There was very few things what I started with, I finished with. Some clothing items I sent home, even in the cold, because I had a little bit too much. They say you pack your fears. Well, being from Florida, I had no idea how cold it was going to get. And it got cold,
Yeah.
but I still had more clothes than I need when I started. And all of the other gear that I started with, I pretty much took to Katahdin with me.
And I know you started very early, so you talked about the cold. It was in the middle of February, wasn't it, when you started?
Yeah, I started February 14th.
Did that seem a good idea to you at the time?
Yes. Looking
What did
back,
it feel like? What did it feel like on the 15th?
it was cold. It's snowy and rainy. Well, I had told myself when I first started hiking, and it's true, I'm more of a tent guy. That's my home. That's where I want to be. And I was only going to sleep in shelters if it wasn't raining or some type of precipitation at night. Well, for the first 30 days of my hike, I only spent 5 nights in my tent. We
Wow.
had precipitation 25 of those 30 days of my first start of the hike. And it didn't get any better after the first 30 days.
Yeah, I'd say starting as early as that was before the really cold weather came, wasn't it? Because that was the rainy time, but then you had massively cold weather for a long time after that, didn't you?
Yeah, we had, I want to say, 5 or 6 nor'easters come through. And just when we thought this had to be the last one, there was another one, brewing out in the ocean, and it was coming back through. So I was plowing through waist deep snow at times up in the Smoky Mountains and stuff. It was interesting. It was kind of fun to start with, but as as it got day after day after day, it got taxing.
How did you cope with that though? Was it something that you found more difficult than you expected, or was there ever a time when you thought to yourself, "I've just got to get out of here. I just can't do this."
Oh, there was never a time where I thought I was going to quit, but there were times when I was absolutely miserable and
Right.
freezing cold and realized that, I have to either start moving or start unpacking, and get into my sleeping bag. It was, life or death, not life or death, but it felt like it was life or death at that time.
Yeah. And was your sleeping bag sufficient to keep you warm?
Yeah, I had the 20-degree enlightened equipment bag. The only issue I had with my bag was I was right on the cusp of the regular and long length, and I'm 6'1", and it said up to 6 foot or 6'1", you could get the regular length. I did. I should have got the long length. I had to bury my head inside my sleeping bag a lot. But I got used to that after a few nights.
Right. So you had the cold weather, and somebody said something to you, and I wrote this down, which I think is a great quotation, which says, somebody said to you, "It's not bad weather, it's just the weather."
It's just the weather. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
a guy I hiked with in the beginning, and I hiked with him at the end again too. We ended up meeting back up at the end. His name was Lotus, and we're hiking along through snow and just chugging and chugging and chugging. And what's the weather going to be tonight? And he would say, you know what, it's going to be bad. He says, but it's not bad weather. It's just the weather. So that was our mantra from that point on. It's not bad weather. It's the weather.
So did that change your mindset in some ways?
It really does, because there's not anything you can do about it other than,
Yeah.
if you're that miserable, you can get off the trail, but you're going to hike. I was in a shelter one night with a girl from France, and she had the French accent, and she woke up and it was pouring rain, and everybody in the shelter is just like, oh, just dreading having to get out. And she wakes up all smiling, and she says, if it's sunny out, I'm going to hike. And if it's raining, I'm going to hike. And when she said that, we all looked at each other and like, she's right. Why are we all moping around here? We're going to hike. So,
Yeah.
things.
I'm thinking ahead and thinking back at the same time at the moment. I'm sitting here in Spain. I've been trying to think about my hike coming up in a couple of months' time, and I'm looking forward to it. And I know the weather's going to be a nightmare. Then I'm thinking back to how bad the weather was quite regularly when I was on the trail before. And there's nothing about the weather that ever actually really stopped me doing hiking. I remember standing once underneath a tree with hailstones coming down on me, thinking, what on earth do I do now? Because
Yeah.
the only thing I could do was to keep walking, because I was just getting colder and colder and colder. And you get walking, you start warming up. So that's what I did. And it kind of worked out for me.
Yeah. When you get cold, you've really only got two choices. You either walk or you start unpacking to where you can get into your sleeping bag.
Absolutely right. Now, I know you finished in September, so nearly 7 months, but you had to take some time off the trail, didn't you? What happened to you?
Well, I was just outside of Dartmouth College in Hanover, Vermont area, and I stepped over a rock. And, stepping over the rock on the other side was a root that wasn't, it was above the flat part of the ground. And my left ankle slipped down, and I cranked it over pretty bad and went down and realized when I got up that this is more than just an ankle turn.
Yeah.
It put me off the trail for 3 weeks.
Wow. And that was actually a broken ankle, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, it was a fractured ankle. It was the outside part of the ankle bone that had fractured, which was really a clean break as it came through.
I often found the roots worse than the rocks. A wet root is just a disaster waiting to happen every single time.
Yeah, you can expect that. You can see a wet rock, but sometimes a wet root is underneath a leaf or something, and it'll get you.
So you got a broken ankle. You're in the middle of the woods. How on earth did you get out?
This is a great story. Yeah, when I fell down, I got up and I looked, and within 20 or 30 feet in front of me was a dirt road. And I'm like, wow, is that luck? So I hobbled down to the dirt road. I sat down, I got out my gut hooks on my phone, and the dirt road wasn't on gut hooks. So I pull out my AWOL guide, and the dirt road is not on AWOL. And the next outlet for the trail was another road 4 miles down the road. And I'm thinking, I don't know if I can, I know I can't make 4 miles. So I got up and I started hobbling down the dirt road, and I didn't take 10 steps before a truck comes driving up the dirt road. Well, I stood out and I kind of waved him down. And the guy says, I said, hey, where does this dirt road go to? And he said, well, you look like you're hobbling. Where do you need to get to? And I told him, I said, well, I'm going to need to get to a emergency care or a hospital. And he said, well, hop in the truck. I'll take you. And
because hopping was about all you could do at the time.
Yeah, I about hopped in there. So we got in the truck and he drove me. It was a 45-minute ride to get to the hospital there at Dartmouth College. And he drove me the whole way. I asked him if I could give him some gas money and anything. He's like, no, I'd be glad to take you. He's the nicest guy in the world. It was just intervention that happened. I was so lucky.
Yeah. And doesn't that speak to the magic of the trail and how people around the trail seem to be so much nicer than everybody else you meet in so-called real life, aren't they?
Well, it's unbelievable. In my career, I ran across a lot of people that weren't, the top of the line people, and to go out on the trail and meet the type of people that are out there helping hikers, they're just a different breed of people, like you said, from what I'm used to. And it was an amazing experience for me. That's just one instance of that kind of stuff.
But it's not just the hikers themselves, is it? It's the people around the trail who seem to understand the importance of the trail to people on it, don't they?
You're so right there. It's amazing that the people around the trail towns, hitchhiking. I was scared to death, not scared to death, but hitchhiking. I'd never hitchhiked in my life. And the first time I hitchhiked, it was a breeze. It was nothing. And people are glad to help you.
They really are. And I say, anybody listening, they're probably shaking their head sometimes. They think, that can't be true. It is until you experience it. You will be shocked how nice people are to you on the trail. It really is lovely. So you were helped by these people. They got you to the hospital, and you were not diagnosed. I presume they did an X-ray to show you had this fracture. That's normally quite a long recovery period. How long did you take at home?
Well, the doctor that looked at my X-ray was a hiker himself. So another stroke of luck there. And I talked to him about it, and I said, listen, I've got to get back out on this trail. I got 400 something miles to go. And he told me this. He said, listen, you're going to have to take some time off, at minimum 2 weeks. He said, but you got to understand that you've got the White Mountains coming up in front of you, and that's the hardest part of the trail. So you're going to need to make sure that ankle is strong before you start going again. And so what I did was I took the Dartmouth coach over to Boston Airport and flew home and stayed there for 3 weeks till I thought I was better, and flew back out and started at the same spot that I dropped off at. And I realized that 3 weeks probably wasn't enough, but I went real slow and took it very gingerly as I could until I felt like I was strong enough to keep going hard again.
So what was it like when you first got back on the trail? You were 3 weeks off, so your trail legs, and to some degree, which needed to be built up by then, had probably wasted away a bit, hadn't they? And how
Oh,
was
yeah.
it when you first got back? I mean, not only on your ankle, which obviously you needed to look after, what about your legs and your breathing generally?
Well, it was almost like starting over. I mean,
I'm sure.
that it took me another minimum 2 to 3 weeks before I felt like cardiovascularly I was even close to where I was before. And I don't think my legs came back to me until I was probably out in the middle, if not out of the White Mountains. It took a while. It was hard on me.
I bet it was. Now, I imagine that being a probation officer in your past, you had a relatively regimented life prior to this journey. So, how did the change in lifestyle affect you? Because this wasn't probation office, it wasn't the work you saw, anything like the work you did. How did that sort of change in lifestyle affect you?
Well, it was hard. Well, not hard, but it was eye opening because nothing that you plan ever works out the way like you planned it. You can't go in and say, I'm going to do this, 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 and this. You might be able to plan your day out, but you can't plan beyond a day or two ahead as to what's going to happen on the trail. You never know. So as time went on, I would plan my day. I would plan for my next resupply 3 or 4 or 5 days out. But I would plan each day. I would give myself a goal I wanted to attain, one that I could come up short at if I didn't feel good or the weather changed or whatever. And if I really felt good when I got to my goal, another place I could go, whether, so it'd be 15, 18 or 20 miles is the day I would plan. And most of the time I ended up making my goal, and maybe a few times I'd go a little bit further, but that's how I ended up having to plan everything day to day. It wasn't beyond. If you were to ask me on the trail what I was going to be doing 6 days, 5 days from now, I would say I don't have no idea where I'm going to be.
And don't you think that's a wonderful thing? The feeling that your only immediate concern is where you're going to sleep that night, isn't it?
It is a strange but wonderful feeling, yes, and that's one of the things I took from the trail. Was being able to downsize everything into what's happening now and what's happening today, rather than worried about what's going to happen in a week.
Yeah, that living in the moment has become more and more of a theme in recent weeks, I must admit. And I confess, a lot of that I'm hearing from people, certainly of my era. You're in your late 50s, I'm in my mid 60s. But my era, and I recount the 50s to 70s as my era, I guess. But really, it's that thing of this freedom that you've got in your life and this living in the moment, which becomes so important. It never seemed to matter to me when I was younger. I think almost naturally you live in the moment. But when you're older, that feeling tends to slip away until you get back on the trail, or till you get on the trail, doesn't it?
Well, you're right, and it's a great thing, especially coming from the employment that I had, being able to quickly learn, going back to that childhood type of feeling where you're living moment to moment. Where for 35 years you've been living, in a different way where you're structured life that these things are going to happen over the next 6 months. Now it's like, well, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And this is what I'd like to happen. And I can make it happen, but I can't control how I'm going to get there.
Did people react to you in a certain way when you let them know in the previous life you've been a probation officer, or was everybody on the trail as open as I found them to be?
Well, almost everybody was open. And one of my things that I was kind of concerned about going on the trail and being a law enforcement officer or an ex-law enforcement officer was dealing with, you've heard of people, drugs on the trail. And to
Sure.
be honest with you, I never had an issue with that. Only one time did somebody mention about, smoking weed. And I just said, that's not me. I don't do that. I says, and I would appreciate if you do, that you don't do it around me. And that was not an issue. I mean, and that was one time out of 7 months that ever happened. So it was not a concern once I realized that, not everybody's out there a crazy hippie or anything. The conceptions that you have.
I must admit, it took me a long time to realise that when the youngsters around me started referring to having a safety meeting, a safety meeting was, we're going to have some drugs. Are you okay with that? I was always okay. I never did it myself. But yeah, happy days as far as I'm concerned. They all seemed so good and so respectful, I thought, of everybody else around them. I never found myself any problem at all. So I'm glad you had a similar sort of experience.
Yeah, it almost gave me new faith in the younger generation.
Good. I'm glad it has. I think virtually everybody of our generation nearly always says that the people, they were so impressed by the youngsters who they hiked around. And I think that's always been one of my big takeaways from my hike. And hopefully, and I expect it to be the case, it's going to be the same again when I go again this year, that I'm going to meet these amazing young guys and girls in their early 20s, just getting on with life and having a great time out in the woods.
Yeah, it's quality. They're quality people. Once you get up the trail, all of the riffraff is gone. Yeah, they don't last very long. And there's not all the riffraff. Are very few people out there like that, but there are some.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, it's like in every walk of life, I guess.
Yeah.
Now you've had 4 months to reflect upon your journey, and by the way, this is a reflection of what it's going to be like ongoing. You're going to be reflecting upon your journey for the rest of your life. Have you changed your impressions of the trail since you've finished?
I think that I've fallen in love with it even more.
Interesting.
When I left it, I was ready to be done. And now that I'm home, I can't wait to get back. Me and my wife are going to go up and meet with Fresh Ground, who runs what they call the Leapfrog Cafe, doing trail magic. And we're going to go up and meet him in mid-February. And then we've got to come back home for a little while. And then I'm going to come back out in March and do some more trail magic and take my wife to we're going to hike some of the places that I really fell in love with and wanted her to be with me. So we're going to hike some of those places in March.
Nice. So do
some more trail magic.
Did she ever consider coming with you?
No. She's she likes hiking, and she'll hike for a week or so, but she's not into the sweaty through hike, buggy, poop in the woods type of thing. She doesn't mind that, but she's not going to do it for a 6-month period.
Isn't it amazing that? Interesting. I've not asked this to many people. Isn't it extraordinary how quickly you get used to that? As you say, the poop in the woods and the sweaty and not sharing and stuff. You get used to it, and it becomes. I've found plenty of people who said, "I prefer this way of life."
Yeah, I can see that. You get used to it very quickly. You have to, and getting your water from a stream and filtering it, and
nothing tastes better. Nothing tastes better than stream water, does it?
Oh, you're right. You can't get any better, especially when it's cold. When it's coming out of the mountain cold, sometimes I just take a break and sit there and drink as much as I could handle if it was cold.
Yeah. Do you have any ambitions to do any other long distance hikes, or was this a one and done for you?
Well, when I first got toward the end, I'm like, no, I'm done. This is not going to happen again. But now that I'm back, we've already started planning. Me, my wife, and my stepson are going to go for he's graduating from the University of Florida in May. And in July, we're going to fly to Iceland, and we're going to do the Lagavagar Trail, which is
good for you.
It's a short trail. I think it's like 65 miles, something like that. But we're going to do that and spend a week up in Iceland as his graduation present and our fun time. And then
very nice.
I've been toying with the idea of the Florida Trail. And I've also maybe in my future doing the PCT. And, once you do 2, you're going to have to do 3. So it's a thought in my mind, but I'm not committed to anything at this point.
That is amazing. You were so enthusiastic when you reached out. And funnily enough, I saw a video of you today, by the way, I thought on your YouTube channel, how you're asking people who are going in 2019 to send links to you so that you can follow them in 2019, which I thought was a very generous spirit as well. So I know that people out there, are putting their YouTube channels up, and I know you want to subscribe. So I'll share your details and whatever you share with me in the show notes, and people can contact you if they want to let you know where what their YouTube channel is.
That'd be great. I'm kind of starting to live my last year through watching some of these thru hikers getting ready. Like right now they're doing their gear videos, and I'm like, oh, they're doing that right, and this is good, and I can't wait for some of them to get started. And like I said, we're going to be out there in February and part of March doing some hiking ourselves and doing some trail magic. So I'm hoping to meet up with a lot of these people and, feeding them or slack packing them or whatever I can do to help and pay back.
That's really cool. Now I actually want to ask you one more thing. Actually, I've just suddenly struck me. If there's one thing that you learned from your journey that you would like to pass on to the class of 2019, including me, by the way, what would that be?
Well, I hate the cliche because everybody says it, but you have to hike your own hike. And that encompasses a lot of things. Use the gear that you think is going to work for you. Wear the clothing that you think is going to work for you. Eat the food that you think is going to work for you. Stop when you need to stop, when your body tells you to, when your body thinks you can do. When your body tells you can do more, you can do more. So, that encompasses all of the hike your own hike deal. And if you listen to your body and you listen to yourself, you can be successful. If you try to hike somebody else's hike, you're going to fail. Things are going to go wrong for you.
Yeah, it's a cliche for a very good reason. It makes a lot of sense. Hike your own hike. And there are so many people on Facebook willing to tell you that you're doing the wrong thing. You need to know that you're doing the right thing because it's your hike and you're going to get there the best way that you think. So you should definitely go along with that.
Yeah, well, another thing, the bottom line is it's pass or fail, and it's not the first person that gets there. It's not the fastest person that gets there. It's just getting there, whether it takes you 7 months or whether it takes you 9 months or whether it takes you 3 months or 2 months. It's a pass or fail deal. And when I say fail, the people that don't make it, it's not a failure. That's the wrong word. They're still learning and gaining knowledge and everything about the trail and probably having the time of their life. So there's no real fail. That's the wrong word to say. But the bottom line is you're either going to make it all the way to Katahdin or you're not, whether you do it in 6 months or 3 months. It doesn't make a difference.
I quite agree. Well, look, thanks so much for reaching out, Randy. I appreciate the time you've given us. And I love this. I love sharing the story of the 2018ers. They've got it fresh in their minds and they've done it and they are delighted they've done it, obviously. And what I love is how they want to pass on their information to anybody coming after them. And I think that's a wonderful part of the spirit of the trail as well. So I really appreciate you talking to us.
Well, thank you, Steve. And by the way, I was listening to your podcast before and during my hike. So I've been listening to you for a while.
Okay, I appreciate it. Well, thanks so much for your time. And we'll talk again soon, okay?
All right. Thanks, Steve.
Cheers then. Bye.
Bye-bye.
There's nothing that this trail can put in front of me that I can't do. I really like that self-realization, and watching hikers post-hike videos certainly makes much more sense than watching somebody who doesn't yet know how badly his or her gear is going to let them down. Given my focus on tents at the moment, it was good to hear Randy's thoughts on Z-Packs. In fact, hearing him say that he visited them in Florida set me on the same path, which I'm going to come back to in a moment. Clearly, though, the trail impacted Randy so much that he's heading out to do Trail Magic this year with his wife. I so hope that I ran into them. Having answered my own questions last week for the class of 2019, this week I return to the endlessly confusing subject of gear choice. Let's hear how badly I'm doing. So this week, I'm going to tell you where my thoughts are at about the hike because I'm finding it really difficult to focus on getting new stuff with all the advice and the YouTube videos out there. I must say, listening to Randy and his thoughts on Z-Packs, I'm veering towards them and I've written to them to go and visit them and perhaps do an interview with them. I think that'd be fun. I just need to see how feasible it is for me to go to their offices. They're in Florida, so it shouldn't be too much of a problem. It looks like it's only about a 3-hour drive, and I think I'd learn so much from spending a bit of time with them. Because, when you go into a shop, you get the shopkeeper's advice, and really, I want to know what these people who invent this stuff really think about it. I've heard virtually no bad stuff about Z-Packs, so if I can pull the trigger on spending $600 on a tent, then that may be the choice. The other alternative is Tarp Tent, and because they're in California, I think I'm unlikely to be able to visit them. I did get a SpeakPipe message from G-Bolt, our guest on the show a couple of weeks back, and he said this.
Hello, Mighty Blue. G-Bolt here. You know as well as anyone that gear choices are a personal matter. However, you asked for opinions, so I'll give you mine. The Trek in 2018 noted that the Osprey was the most common pack on the AT, so you could continue to use your Osprey and be more than happy with it on your next thru hike. However, if you're looking for a change and possibly to go slightly lighter and less volume, I strongly urge you to consider the American-made ULA Circuit or Catalyst. They carry slightly more weight than the ULA Ohm 2.0 that I used on my 2018 Trek. I'm more than sure you will be happy with that choice. As far as the tent, you found success with the Rainbow, so why not just go for the tarp tent double Rainbow and get the inner liner that takes care of some of the condensation issues. It's the tent that I'm going to purchase in the future if I decide to go to the ground rather than hammock. I do not believe that the duplex is worth the money for the material it's made out of. I believe you're smarter to stick with the tarp tent double Rainbow that also has a self-standing option, especially in the New England states, especially on wood.
Well, that was a bit of an abrupt ending, wasn't it? I'm not sure if G-Bolt was done or if he'd reached the 90-second limit. So let's talk about the top tent. When I was preparing for my 2014 hike, I knew literally zero about hiking and gear selection. When I went to my local hiking store, it felt like I often feel when I'm going to go buy a smartphone. You know what I mean? The number of options, not only for tents, but everything, are just overwhelming. So my go-to source for gear back then was outdoorgearlab.com. And I generally went with their best advice, their editor's award or their best value. I read all the reviews and tried to imagine how things would work out on my hike. What I didn't really take into account, and you soon learn the value of this, was the overall weight that I was carrying. I also didn't take into account the packs and the tents and everything else that Outdoor Gear Labs didn't take into account. I always felt that I was only looking at what they wanted me to see, so I got a little bit leery about their selection process. That said, I at least had some insights into some of the things that I needed. By the way, when I was looking up all these things today, I got drawn right back down the rabbit hole and was checking everything out and second-guessing myself again. Flipping nightmare. Anyway, the Tarp Tent Double Rainbow was, at that time, one of the top tents recommended, so I went ahead and, rather stupidly, didn't go for the Double Rainbow, but went for the Single Rainbow, or just the Rainbow. And while I loved the tent, I always wished I'd gone for the Double. My entirely unreasonable reasoning went something like this. I'll never be sharing the tent with anybody else, so why would I want a double tent? As soon as I started using it, I always wanted just a little bit more space. So if I go with Tarp Tent this time, I will definitely be going for the Double Rainbow. I checked the price and directly from Tarp Tent, and by the way, their customer service is really excellent. I can get it for $329.46, which includes the inner liner that G-Bolt mentioned. I got the liner first time round for my single rather. And once I worked out how to fit it, after about 200 miles on the trail, it was really great at channeling away any condensation. The tent comes in at 46 ounces, so not totally lightweight, though certainly not heavy. It's definitely one of the main contenders for me. So let's talk about the Z-Pax Duplex again. Loads of people seem to love this tent, and though G-Bolt didn't seem too keen on the value of it, I guess it's all about what it's worth to you, or in this case, to me. As I think I mentioned last week, when you consider that this will be my home for much of the 6 months I'm likely to be out there, $100 a month is pretty darn good, so I'm definitely not put off by the price. I really think that weight is going to be one of the critical factors in whether or not I can complete this journey this time, so I can't ignore the fact that while it's $600, the duplex weighs just 19 ounces. I really hope that I get some more clarity on this if and when I visit them. Now let's get on to backpacks. As G-Bolt mentioned, I've got an Osprey Volt 75, which is just over 4 pounds in weight. Actually, I don't think it's available anymore. It isn't the one I hiked the AT with back in 2014. That was a Gregory Bautoro 65, and I really enjoyed the tons of pockets that the Bautoro has. In fact, I found one of them once I got back off the trail. I didn't even find when I was actually on the trail. This pack weighs nearly 5 pounds though, and it's looking a little bit ragged right now. The ULA circuit, from what I could read this morning, is between 36 and 41 ounces, depending upon the configuration. I think I'd need to try it on before I came to any decision on it, but that weight difference is really going to be more of a factor this year than it was last time. Let's face it, I'm 5 years older and almost certainly 5 years weaker, so I need to think more about that. I know that there's no real comparison when it comes to the type of hike, but I took my Osprey with me on the Camino and it worked out just fine. My current inclination is to go with that, but I will be trying out a few more when I get back to Florida. So that's really all I've been thinking about this past week, with the main focus being on my tent. I had a couple of emails that also pointed me to the duplex, by the way. Oh, one last thing. Clothes. I'm looking for a puffy to wear, and the current favourite seems to be the Mountain Hardware Ghost Whisperer. I got that from Bruce Matson, or RTK, and somebody else mentioned it the other day as well. Getting my temperature right on the trail was always an issue for me, and if I'm going to be leaving a little earlier than last time, I really need to be sure that I'm going to stay warm. So, slow progress, as I always expected it to be. I'm a kind of leave it to the last minute kind of guy, so I'm not confident that these next few weeks will be terribly productive in themselves, but at least I'm thinking about it, and that is always good. Lastly, let's get on to day 25 of our book. I must say, despite Colin's constant cursing and self-flagellation on the journey, he really does say some funny things. I have to cut out a hell of a lot because I'm laughing. I know that this isn't always easy to listen to, yet I find it visceral. And because I know the guy from our school days together, I probably feel some of his pain as a mate. I hope that you're enjoying it, if that's the word, as well. I'll see you next week. Chapter 26, Day 25, Walking Apart.
Ellie, got a problem with that? By afternoon, I have conquered the summit, all 1,504 metres of it, the highest peak of the Camino. I reach the Iron Cross, take time to sit alone on the mound of stones left by centuries of pilgrims before me, give thanks, say a prayer, make a wish, and toss a small pebble onto the top, adding my own piece of history to the Camino. My stone resting at the peak, I blow a kiss skyward, send them all a smile, and continue on Mandarin, and then a further 7 kilometres to the small village of El Asibo. I'd heard there was a quaint refuge there that a few people know about. Unfortunately, having trudged for 2 hours through rain and gathering darkness, I find my quaint 10-bed refuge is, in fact, a 40-bed dormitory above a bar chock full of bodies both upstairs and down. There is no room at the inn, and it is still raining outside. In the downstairs bar, I meet a fellow Aussie chick from Bondi who teaches me my favourite Spanish saying to date, no pasa nada. One thing Australians and Spaniards share is a fabulous, lax, no worries, she'll be alright mate, attitude. No room left? No pasa nada. Nowhere to sleep? No pasa nada. No shower or food? No pasa nada, have another drink. Jodie is homeless too and appears far less concerned about it than I am. So I follow her lead and order another vino. Eventually, after many vinos and an impromptu rendition of the Spanish national anthem that gets the entire bar jumping, someone takes pity on us and tosses us a flea-bitten mattress to lay on the floor. Bung knee, blisters, sore foot, tendinitis, crazy travelling companion, sleeping on the floor of a dodgy bar. No pasa nada. Next morning when I wake, an elderly man hears me get up and appears in the bar. He smiles and says, "Good morning," then offers me coffee. I opt for herbal tea. My liver has a headache. Knowing we can't communicate much further, the precious fellow takes a seat beside me, watching on intrigued as I sit on a bar stool, popping fresh blisters and tidying my feet for the day ahead. A needle, a cigarette lighter to sterilise the tip, a tube of betadine, a roll of gauze, a pair of scissors, some band-aids, plaster strips, sponge padding and outer dressing to hold it all in place. I'm good at it now. He nods approvingly. Bueno. He has a gentle face and reminds me of my grandfather. I set off into the thick mountain air. It was dark when I arrived last night, but the new day reveals a stunning landscape of mushroom mountain tops, breaching thick strokes of sweeping cloud. I breathe in the views in every direction, like perusing the timeless works of the Louvre. Today, I will make my way through Melinesica and on to Ponferrado. The old man tells me it will be one of the prettiest days of the Camino. Already it is.
Colin. More Tomas and less Coca-Cola. I reached the Cruz de Ferro, the emblem of the Camino, a simple iron cross that runs out of a long wooden post and is surrounded by Miladoiro, a huge mound of stones. Many pilgrims throw stones onto the pile, symbolic of casting their sins aside. Some have been carried all the way from home. Hordes of Spaniards crowd around the base having their photographs taken, whooping and swapping high fives as if they've just climbed Everest. Tourist buses pile up, a stop off on the way to Santiago. Coming down the hill, I hear a bell tolling in the fog. I have reached Manjarin. the ruins of a town deserted for years until it was revived by one Tomas Martinez Lopez, who camped here with a sleeping bag and a lantern on his way to Santiago 12 years ago, and decided to become a modern-day Templar Knight and dedicate his life to the service of pilgrims, as the Templars did, or as they were supposed to have done. The Templars have achieved a certain notoriety due to recent medieval conspiracy theories about them. In their distinctive white mantle with red cross, these mysterious warrior monks first rose to prominence during the Crusades. They were essentially the Pope's private army before they turned renegade and thus became enormously wealthy, with land holdings right across Europe from Scotland to Palestine. Although dedicated to chastity and poverty, they became the first international bankers. Their legacy in churches, castles and preceptories is seen all over Spain. On the edge of the town there is a cross bearing the name Eva, in memory of a 17-year-old Dutch girl who was planning to walk the Camino with her cousin in 1996. She was murdered in her bed by an intruder a few months before she was due to leave. Her cousin walked the way in her memory and erected the cross here. 100 yards further on is the albergue, built out of one of the ruins by Thomas himself. Pilgrims once slept on the floor, but now there is a refurbished barn with thick mattresses. There's no running water. It has to be fetched each day from a well 3 kilometres away. But this at least is authentic. The Templars never washed either. Apparently they looked great and stank. There are dogs, children and geese on the loose everywhere. It's basically a hippie commune, Woodstock with chainmail. When I arrive, Thomas is conducting a service and a huddle of pilgrims are standing in a circle around him and one of his knights. They are dressed in white robes with the Red Cross pate, and Thomas is holding a Templar sword and saying a prayer in Spanish. An aria lilts softly on the cassette player. The walls of the albergue are decorated with newspaper articles, some about the refuge, others from the Messianic Times, a right-wing Christian lunatic fringe newspaper. The coffee is cold, but the biscuits are still pretty good. Thomas's past is murky. He left behind a wife, 2 teenage daughters, and a comfortable middle-class life in Madrid to take up the call. He is obviously eccentric, possibly cracked, but does not appear to be dangerous. There aren't enough eccentrics in the world, so God bless him and keep him. I leave some money in the tin that says Donativos. More Thomas and less Coca-Cola, my prescription for a more interesting world. After Mandarin, I climb through trails of chestnuts encrusted with moss, like my socks. The moor of the crouching hills forms the arms of a sphinx. These hills are known as the Maragateria. The path has been bulldozed through shale, over hills thick with purple and orange gorse. The houses are stone and wood with slate roofs. I have a late lunch, the menu del dia, in a dodgy bar in El Acebo. Green beans and bacon, a whole trout with soft pink flesh and fruit, all for €8. I am wasting away to nothing, but Christ, I'm getting my vitamins doing it. I have the most perfectly balanced diet of any skeleton I ever saw. As I whack down the complimentary bottle of local red wine, I realise I have just walked for 8 hours with barely a break, and I'm not even tired. When did I get this fit? What happened between Roncesvalles and here? Screw the SAS, I'm trying out for the next Everest expedition. Hold the oxygen, just give me an extra pair of socks. The guidebook says that leaving El Acebo I should look out for an iron bicycle that commemorates the death of a German pilgrim killed here en route to Santiago. The miracle is that the body count isn't a lot higher. The sender often meanders close to the road, and a lot of drivers early in the morning and on weekends are pissed out of their minds. And that's just the police. On the way out of town it starts to rain. Let's pause for a moment and watch one half-pissed Australian trying to shrug his poncho over himself and his backpack while crying for his dead wife. The weight of my backpack and the effect of a litre of wine with lunch overwhelm me, and I fall on my back in a ditch. I lie there, looking up at an indifferent heaven, the rain stinging my face. Clearly I'm not holding it together. I'm coming undone, slowly, delicately, painfully, silently. This walk, this strange and haunted landscape, the heat, the terrible aloneness, is eating at my sanity like sharks feeding off a sick whale. There is still more than a week to go, and I don't know that I can take another step. This is what grief does. It's like a mugger. It lies in wait in the bushes and jumps out at you and grabs your wallet while you're looking the other way, thinking of something else. Or someone else. I've got a litre of wine in me, and I'm defenceless. Bang! Her face the first time I saw her. Knee in the groin. That same face in her coffin. Elbow in the teeth. Poncho smothering me in a gust of wind. Oh, this poncho. Get me off this mountain. I try to stand and fall backwards into the bushes on top of my backpack and lie there kicking like an upended turtle. What am I doing here? Where's Ellie? Why are my wife's fingernails raking my heart? Why now? I get my shit together and roll down the hill to the next village. This will end one day, I hope, but that's what I want to go to Finisterre to talk to God about. That night, in yet another village, yet another bar, I see a picture on the front page of the local newspaper. A donkey standing forlorn by the side of a major highway while paramedics work to resuscitate a man in the background. I recognise the donkey before I recognise the name. It is Robert Bonamy, the Frenchman we met on the road near Astorga, the man from Le Puy who walked to Santiago for his dead wife. Walking by the highway at Valverde de la Virgin, he suffered a heart attack and died. He was 56. He had kept faith with his promise to her, and it seemed to me then that whatever God is out there had kept faith with him. He had not asked more of him in his life without her. He made his pilgrimage and then he took him home. What a nice thing to do, both of them, man and God. Reading on, I realised that the moment Robert was dying was the same moment I found in the dirt by the side of the road, a small silver miracle medallion sold cheap in any church souvenir shop. I had picked it up on impulse and now retrieve it from my pack. On it there is an engraving of the Madonna, the goddess. Robert has his miracle. This romantic, this head case, still hopes to find his own. And however it comes in happy endings or with paramedics and donkeys, perhaps we are not to know. It seems to me right then that there are harsher things in life than death.
Ellie, eggs and endings. In Ponferrada, I have a conversation with a man and his 2 daughters in Supermercado. It starts when I ask for 2 eggs. Where are you from? Australia. You came all the way to Spain just for the Camino? Yes, just for the Camino. Incredible. Where did you begin? Roncesvalles. Roncesvalles? You must have caught a bus through the Meseta. No. No bus? Incredible. The 3 are amazed. They didn't call me crazy, but what's more amazing is that I have so far understood every word of their Spanish. They have obviously dumbed it down for me, but broken or not, it is a conversation nonetheless. The man takes my hand to focus my attention, with his arms stretched out wide like a fisherman boasting about the one that got away. He tells me that Roncesvalles to Ponferrada is a very long way. Then, with his fingers side by side, he indicates that Ponferrada and Santiago are very, very close. Not far at all. I look at the 2-inch gap between his fingers and it hits me. The majority of the Camino is behind us now. Nearly 600 kilometres. With only 200 to go, we are actually close to Santiago. See? I ask. See, the beautiful sisters confirm in unison. Their reply brings a gentle sense of achievement that only now I feel safe enough to enjoy. The end is in sight. We're on the home stretch. The next day, I leave the tent city in Ponferrada and head back towards the bridge to pick up the trail on the other side of town. Temporary campgrounds have been established from Castilla y León all the way to Galicia to take up the overflow from the albergues. It is the Jacobean, the Holy Year, and compounding this, the Spanish school holidays have just begun. There are thousands more on the trail now than when Colin and I began. More than were here this time last year, and more than will be here the next time. The Holy Year is awaited and celebrated years in advance. The next is not until 2010. With so many new people around, most of whom have only been walking since León or Astorga, or who may even be setting out right now beside me, the atmosphere has completely changed. I opted for the alternative accommodation while standing among 100 other pilgrims lined up in a fight for beds outside the albergue. The tents are much quieter and less intrusive. At best, the newcomers are loud, obnoxious, inconsiderate, rude and unfriendly, like a raucous football ground, all cheering for opposing teams. I feel out of place among them. This will be the next challenge, to hold on to what we've known of the Camino so far. The peace, silence, acceptance, generosity, space and surrender amidst an unaccommodating environment, and to find the good in the bad once more.
Colin, the House of Holy Horrors. A long descent to Molina Seca in the darkness, orange lights burning in the spire of the church, slipping on loose shale underfoot, the barking of dogs welcoming the entrance of pilgrims who have made the pre-dawn trek before me. The smell of charcoal from a recent forest fire hangs in the air like a pall. The town looks like an alpine ski village, something Disney would build if you were making a cartoon about the Camino. I would have stayed longer, but the Camino is like watching the world from a very slow-moving train. I huff and puff on through. Miles to go before I sleep. Miles to go before I sleep. Picture postcard is not a description you would apply to the next big town, Ponferrada, unless you like sending people postcards from places like Birmingham or Pittsburgh. Ponferrada is not pretty. It may have been once, when the Templars built their castle high on the hill, but now there are just rows of cranes crouched over apartment blocks like wading birds over a polluted pond. There's a disused coal station, straight out of Dickens, and acres of coal yards fallen into disrepair. On the outskirts there are allotments where old men in track pants and rubber boots toil over root vegetables. I try to slow my pace. I know Ellie is struggling with a knee and foot, and I don't want to catch her up just yet. I figure she needs time on her own. For one thing, she needs time away from me, and the other thing she needs, because she said so, and it occurs to me she's absolutely right, is that she needs to prove to herself she's not dependent on anyone else's encouragement or strength to do this. In fact, I suspect she never was, but I'm one of those guys who have just one pace, walk hand in hand along a beach with the most beautiful girl in the world, and I break into a jog. Market gardens and two-storey square brick houses flash past. The scenery reminds me of old Yugoslavia, but without the ethnic cleansing. I climb past vineyards. There is in my breast the burgeoning hope that I have seen the last, at least in this lifetime, of wheat. There is a church in Casabelos town square. Or is it a church? For a moment I believe I've stumbled into the Casabelos Catholic schoolboys under 15 trophy room. There are cups everywhere. What are they for? Fairest and best gilt passer, 1999. Most choir boys behind the confessional, 1905 to 1941. The place is terrifying. Along the walls there are more life-size Barbie dolls in black mantillas, and these are, I assume, representations of the grieving Virgin Mary. And here is the son she is grieving for. On the cross, blood everywhere. Christ. Bring in the forensics team and a fire hose. I feel physically sick. It reminds me of a waxwork torture chamber they built on Southend Pier when I was a kid. There were moving waxworks of racks, thumb screws, branding irons and the Spanish boot, which you could enjoy for sixpence while you licked your candy floss. This is just like that, the House of Holy Horrors. I turn around and bump into a martyr with a knife sticking through his torso like a scene from Aliens. He looks so real I say, "Oh, excuse me," for sake. I go across the street to a bar and order a café con leche. To take my mind off the House of Holy Horrors, I start a conversation in pig Spanish with the bar lady. She tells me that she'd like to Roberto Carlos, the Real Madrid left back. Of course she would. Doesn't everyone in this weird country?
Ellie. Side steps and detours. It is a perfect walking day. The morning passes rather uneventfully as I tramp through 3 small villages, Colombrianos, Fuentes Nueves and Campon Aria. Then further on I stumble across Jodie sitting on a tree stump by the side of the path, grinning from ear to ear and smoking let's say a cigarette. She screams, "Me Aussie mate, how are you, eh?" I jump, startled. We hug and laugh. Jodie plans to stop further on, but for now we wander together through fields of vineyard grapes and olives while she tells me about how she came to be on the Camino. Jodie was an elite athlete, a national soccer player. She was in training for the Olympics when a knee injury ended her career. In a cruel twist, the injury occurred during a celebrity charity match when she was taken out by a federal politician. She would never play again. She took off travelling once she had recovered. Her limbs are adorned with homemade jewellery and gifts from people she's met along the way. She carries postcards of Australian animals to give in return: koalas, wombats, and the international favourite, kangaroos. She has a natural energy, a kind of spark. Whether it's for 5 minutes or 5 hours, being near her makes my day a little brighter. We pass an open shed with 2 old men sitting inside, whistling as they bottle a new batch of regional wine. Jodie gets a gleam in her eye. Up for a glass of red? We weren't offered a glass of red. Not yet we weren't, she says mischievously, and we turn around. Sure enough, the old fellows are more than happy to see us, and we spend a large portion of the remaining afternoon sampling every type of wine produced from their vineyard, as well as corking a few bottles of our own. From sumptuous red blends to pinots, whites, and sticky desserts, one by one the men proudly present a never-ending procession of clean skins. Before long, all my major organs are buoyed, floating freely in a concoction of rocket fuel, and I'm glowing like a neon sign in King's Cross. The old guys offered to drive us into the next town. I like the idea, but Jodie won't let me accept. Come on, she says, throwing her arm around me. We'll be all right. No pasa nada. Of course, no pasa nada. What was I thinking? We thank the men for their hospitality. They kiss us on both cheeks, one slaps me in the arse with a wink, and off we stagger towards Cacabelos.